What do you mean the night shift hasn't had a break in 2 days? Harlan Hayes stared down at the report in his hand, an internal audit from one of his parking facilities in northern Illinois. The numbers weren't the problem. Revenue was steady. Theft was low. But the notes from the compliance officer were a different story. Missed breaks, high turnover, repeated staff shortages, and a 2-month-old complaint about a faulty heater in the parking booth that still hadn't been resolved. Harlan owned all 19 locations of the parking chain, having bought the company 7 years ago from a retiring couple. Back then, it was barely turning a profit. He'd brought in new systems, cleaned up the books, and grown it into a reliable business. But after the expansion, he'd lost touch. He hadn't met half the current staff personally. Most had no idea what he looked like. Between district managers and store-level leads, too much got filtered before it reached him. So, he made a decision. He'd go undercover at the location with the most complaints, Lot 12, just outside a mid-sized hospital in Rockford. It ran 24 hours, had a single booth, and usually 2 attendants per day. According to the schedule, they were down to just 1 full-time worker. He pulled a name, Troy. Harlan had never met him. He shaved his beard, darkened his graying hair, and wore thick-rimmed glasses. With a patched-up winter coat, a borrowed beanie, and a fake name, Eric, he looked the part of a new seasonal hire. He used one of the staffing agencies they worked with, so the process looked clean. A week later, he was assigned a 3-day training shift. On his first day, he showed up at 5:45 a.m. The wind cut through his jacket like paper. The booth stood alone in the middle of the lot, frosted windows and a flickering overhead light. Inside, a young man in his late 20s was hunched over a folding chair, blowing into his hands. He wore a thin hoodie and a pair of jeans that had to be at least a size too small. No gloves, no heater. "You Eric?" the guy asked, barely glancing up. "Yeah," Harlan nodded, stepping inside. "You Troy?" "Unfortunately." Troy forced a tired smile. "You ever work a booth before?" "Nope." Troy laughed once. "Perfect. You'll fit right in." By 7 a.m., the lot was full. Cars came and went. Troy handled most of the payments while Harlan watched and tried not to look too stiff. But what caught him off guard wasn't the job. It was Troy. The guy was sharp. Friendly to everyone, fast with the register, helped confuse drivers without attitude, and he never sat down for more than a minute. By noon, Harlan's toes were going numb. He tried not to show it, but Troy noticed. "You didn't get a winter kit?" he asked. "A what?" "Coat, gloves, boots. They're supposed to give you a set your first week." Troy rubbed his hands together, then blew into them again. "They told me they were out when I started. That was 6 months ago?" Harlan's jaw tightened. "Who told you that?" "Manager, Dana, said they only give them to full-time staff. I was technically part-time during training. Then they just never followed up." "You ask again?" "3 times. Got told to layer up and stop complaining." Troy didn't sound bitter, just tired. Harlan looked around the booth. The tiny space had a broken space heater in the corner, duct-taped and unplugged. "Does this work?" "Nope. Been dead since October." "Did you report it?" "Every week. Nothing." Harlan didn't answer. His stomach was tight. He looked out the window. Icy wind whipped through the lot, battering the booth. At 2 p.m., Troy stepped outside to help a woman whose car wouldn't start. She was in scrubs, clearly just off a shift. He spent 20 minutes helping her jump the battery. When he came back, his hands were red and raw. "Man, you should have told me," Harlan said. "I could have helped." "Nah, you're new." Troy waved it off. "Besides, she's cool. Brings us coffee sometimes." "And you don't even have gloves?" Troy flexed his fingers. "Nope." Something in Harlan cracked. He stayed quiet the rest of the shift, watching Troy push through the cold like it was normal. At 6 p.m., Troy offered him his number. "In case you got questions or need a swap." Harlan took it. "Thanks, man." As he walked away, he passed Dana, the site manager, pulling up in a warm SUV. She didn't greet Troy, just rolled her window down and said, "Clock out before 7. Overtime's not approved." Then drove off. Harlan stood in the lot, wind howling, boots soaked through. He'd seen enough. Tomorrow, he'd be back. But not as Eric. The next morning, Harlan arrived in a charcoal wool coat and leather gloves, stepping out of his black sedan just after sunrise. He didn't head to the booth. Instead, he walked across the icy lot and into the small operations office tucked behind a row of dumpsters. It was barely more than a converted storage unit one desk. A heater humming from the corner, and a coffee pot that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. Dana was inside, leaning back with her feet on the desk, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, confused. "You lost, sir?" "No," Harlan said calmly. "You're Dana?" "That's me. How can I help you?" He stepped forward and pulled off his gloves. "My name is Harlan Hayes. I own this company." Dana froze. Her knee dropped from the desk. For a long beat, she didn't speak. Then she stood up abruptly, adjusting her coat like it might make her look more professional. I didn't realize you were coming by. I didn't announce it. I was here yesterday as a trainee." Her face shifted. "You were the new guy?" "Yes, I worked a full shift in that booth. What I saw was unacceptable." Dana opened her mouth, then closed it. "You've had one full-time employee running this lot for weeks. He's working without basic cold weather gear, with no functioning heater, in sub-freezing temperatures. You've ignored multiple maintenance reports on that booth. You've denied requests for proper uniforms. And instead of helping your only staff member, you pull up at the end of a 14-hour shift and bark about overtime." Dana's voice cracked slightly. "There's been staffing shortages. We've had trouble filling the position." "Why hasn't it been escalated?" Harlan cut in. "You've got direct access to district ops. You've had weeks of chances." "I submitted the requisition forms. They're still pending." "Don't lie to me. I checked the logs. The last hiring request from this location was dated 4 months ago, and it was marked incomplete." "You never followed up." Dana's eyes darted to the side. I've been managing 3 lots. I can't be everywhere at once." "You've been managing 3 lots from this chair, watching videos on your phone. Meanwhile, Troy's out there doing the job of 2 people in a frozen box. That's not management, that's abandonment." Dana's mouth tightened. "Troy's not exactly complaining. He shouldn't have to. That booth is your responsibility. And let's be clear, this isn't just neglect. It's a liability. If he'd gotten frostbite or collapsed from exposure, we'd be looking at lawsuits. You could have cost this company everything." She stayed silent. "You're relieved of your position, effective immediately." Her eyes went wide. "Wait, just like that? This isn't a warning, it's a termination. Gather your things." When she didn't move, he pointed calmly to the door. "I'll have someone escort you off-site." Dana looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She grabbed her bag in silence and walked out without another word. Harlan waited until the door clicked shut. Then he took out his phone. "Get me Carla from Regional HR, and send a field technician here within the hour. I want that booth heater replaced today." By 8 a.m., a technician had arrived and begun dismantling the broken unit. Harlan walked back to the booth with 2 uniform boxes under his arm. He knocked once before stepping in. Troy looked up, mid-count on the register. He blinked when he saw the face. "Wait, you're Harlan," he nodded, setting the boxes down. "I own the company." Troy stood slowly, eyebrows lifting. "You were the trainee?" "I was." "And I owe you an apology." Troy shook his head. "You don't have to." "I do," Harlan said. "You've been holding this place together by yourself. You've gone above and beyond in conditions no one should have to work in. That shouldn't have happened. It won't happen again." Troy leaned back against the counter, stunned. For the first time, he looked genuinely at a loss. "I didn't think anyone noticed," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to leave the lot hanging." Harlan opened one of the boxes and handed him a thick insulated jacket with the company logo stitched on the shoulder. "You're officially full-time, retroactive to your original hire date. You'll get back pay, full benefits, and a winter gear allowance. That's yours." Troy held the jacket like it wasn't real. "And starting tomorrow," Harlan continued, "you'll have help. We're transferring 2 trained staff from other sites temporarily until we hire locally. You'll be supervising." Troy's mouth opened slightly. "Supervising? You've earned it." For a long moment he didn't respond. Then he swallowed hard and nodded once. "Thank you." Harlan stepped back toward the door. "There's one more thing. I need you to be honest with me. If there's anything else wrong, equipment, policies, anything, you let me know directly. No more filters. Troy gave a small nod. There's been an issue with the ticket dispenser. It jams sometimes during the evening rush. Noted. I'll have someone look at it today. Back in the operations office, Harlan met with the technician, who confirmed the booth heater was beyond repair. A new one was already being installed, with a backup ordered. By noon, Harlan had regional HR on video call. He mandated quarterly site visits from now on, with anonymous employee feedback built into every report. Any location that failed to meet basic standards would be flagged for immediate inspection. No one argued. At 3 p.m., he stood beside Troy in the booth again, watching the cars roll in. The wind still howled outside, but inside, the new heater hummed steadily. Troy wore the new coat. His hands were gloved. His posture had changed, more steady, more relaxed. You know, Troy said, breaking the silence, when I took this job, I figured I'd be invisible. Just another guy in a booth. You were never invisible, Harlan said. The system just made you feel that way. Troy didn't respond at first. Then he nodded once, quietly. Outside, a nurse waved as she pulled in. Troy waved back, then turned to finish a receipt. Harlan stepped back to let him work, silently promising himself he'd never let things slide that far again. Not on his watch. Because leadership wasn't about policies or spreadsheets. It was about people. And starting today, he'd make sure every one of them knew they mattered. Friday morning, the air was thick with frost, the kind that clung to your eyelashes and turned every breath into a visible puff. Harlan arrived before sunrise again, not in disguise this time, and not to observe. He had meetings lined up. Inside the operations trailer, Carla from HR was elbow-deep in paperwork, surrounded by a stack of personnel files and a laptop open to a live scheduling dashboard. She'd driven in from Chicago the night before and hadn't left the office since sunrise. "We've got a bigger issue than I thought," she said without looking up. "Of the 19 lots, 6 are understaffed. 3 have unprocessed maintenance requests older than 60 days. And there's one manager who hasn't logged a full work week in over a month." "Who's that?" "Name's Ron. He's assigned to Lot 7. His timesheets show he clocks in remotely from home, then disappears." Harlan scanned the live system. Lot 7 was near a government building, high volume during business hours. "He's done? I'm drafting his termination now, but that's not the only one." Carla turned her screen. A spreadsheet showed a list of incident flags. Some were minor missed shifts, unreviewed reports, but others were graver. Delayed hazard reports, unfiled injury claims, and one site manager who'd failed to report a verbal altercation between a staff member and a customer. Harlan pointed to the last one. What was the outcome? The employee filed a report directly through the ethics line, said the customer used slurs. The manager told him to toughen up and didn't log it. Who was the employee? Marcus, Lot 4, been with us 2 years. Where is he now? Still on shift, never took a leave. Harlan stood. We're going. Lot 4 was 20 minutes away. The booth sat beside a corporate complex, surrounded by a high concrete wall lined with security cameras. When they arrived, the sun was just cresting the buildings, casting long shadows over the lot. A steady stream of commuters pulled in. Marcus stood inside the booth, tall and broad-shouldered, with short hair and a perfectly pressed uniform. His hands moved quickly over the register, but there was a visible tension in his jaw. Harlan waited until the line thinned, then stepped in with Carla behind him. "Marcus?" The man turned, surprised but composed. "Yes, sir." "I'm Harlan Hayes." Marcus blinked. "You're the owner." "That's right. I read your report, the one about the incident last month." Marcus looked past him at Carla, then back. "Didn't think anyone read those." "They do now." "I didn't want to make it a big thing, but I wasn't going to let it slide either." "You shouldn't have to," Carla said. "And your manager's handling of that was unacceptable. He won't be returning." Marcus gave a small nod, but his shoulders didn't relax. "I need to ask," Harlan said. "Why didn't you take the time off offered in the report?" "Because I knew no one would cover the booth," Marcus replied. "And I didn't want to make the others pick up my slack. We're short as it is." Carla glanced at Harlan. He stepped forward. "That's not your burden to carry anymore. We're bringing in temporary staff starting Monday. You'll have full support, and if you want 2 days off next week, they're yours, paid." Marcus hesitated, then gave the smallest smile. "Appreciate that." They left the booth and walked the perimeter of the lot. Carla took photos of cracked pavement along the entrance lane and a broken light fixture above the pay station. Harlan called maintenance on the spot and demanded a crew by end of day. Back in the car, Carla spoke without looking up from her notes. "There's a pattern here. The same names keep popping up. District leads who've been skating by, letting site managers fail upward." "They're done too," Harlan said. "Every one of them." He returned to Lot 12 by late afternoon. Troy was still on shift, now training a new temp from the city. The man, older and quiet, followed instructions carefully. Harlan stayed back, watching Troy guide him through the register system and explain the flow of peak hours. No hand-holding, just clear, efficient direction. When the training wrapped up, Troy stepped outside for 5 minutes. Harlan joined him by the edge of the lot. "I heard from Carla. You've been checking in with HR about the new equipment list." Troy nodded. "There's still a few things missing. The booth could use a small fan for summer. The AC unit's not great." "Already ordered," Harlan said. "Should be installed before June." Troy looked up at him. "You're serious about fixing this?" "I don't have a choice. I built this company on the idea that we'd be better. Not just cheaper, not just bigger. Better." Troy was silent for a moment, then said, "I got a call from someone at corporate. Said I'm being moved into a field supervisor role." "You are. It's not just a title. You'll be assigned to audit 3 locations, starting with Lot 9. You'll work with Carla to do real-time reporting. You'll have authority to flag managers, submit requests, and oversee training." "That's a lot." "It is, but you've already been doing half that without the title." Troy nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess I have." Back inside the booth, the new temp asked a question about overnight log entries. Troy stepped in to help. Harlan watched him take the lead, not like someone trying to impress, but like someone who knew what needed to be done and just did it. Later that evening, Harlan held a video conference with every regional manager. Attendance was mandatory. Faces filled the screen, some familiar, others he hadn't seen in over a year. He didn't waste time. "There are no more layers between you and me. If a site is underperforming, if a report is ignored, if an employee is mistreated, I will find out. And there will be consequences, not warnings, actions." He let that sink in. "You'll be receiving new audit procedures this weekend. Every location is on a 90-day review. Fail the review, and leadership changes will follow." No one spoke. Harlan ended the call. That night, he sat in his home office, lights low, laptop open to a dashboard showing live status updates from every lot. For the first time in years, he'd seen the cracks up close, and he couldn't look away. There was no pride in what he'd found, only responsibility. Fixing it wouldn't be fast, it wouldn't be easy, but it would happen. Because the people in the booths, the ones like Troy and Marcus, they weren't invisible anymore, not to him. By the following Monday, the cold had let up slightly, but the weather was still sharp enough to bite. The company's new audit team, formed just 72 hours earlier, had begun unannounced visits to the worst-performing lots. Harlan had personally assigned Troy to shadow their first review of Lot 9, a mid-sized location near the county courthouse. It was managed by a woman named Beth Kramer, whose reports were always clean, though her lot had one of the highest staff turnover rates in the region. Troy arrived just after 6 in the morning. The booth was open, but no one was inside. The lot was already half full, judges, clerks, and attorneys parked here for early sessions. He waited 5 minutes before a young man with a thin build jogged up from the back gate, his uniform shirt untucked and damp with sweat. "Sorry," the man said, catching his breath. "I had to park 2 blocks away. The employee lot's full again." Troy checked the name on the schedule. "You're Darren?" "Yeah, I'm the opener today." "Where's your manager?" "Beth? She doesn't come in before 10, usually later. Says there's no point since I know what I'm doing." Troy raised his eyebrows slightly. "And the booth's been unattended since open?" Darren's eyes dropped. "I tried to get here early, but the last shuttle was late. We've told her about the parking issue, but she hasn't changed anything." By the time Beth arrived 10:23, by Troy's watch, she was carrying a smoothie and talking on her phone. She didn't acknowledge Darren or Troy until she finished her call. "Can I help you?" she said, glancing at Troy's company badge. "I'm Troy Reed, field supervisor, here to conduct your operational audit." Beth's expression shifted, her posture stiffening. "Well, no one told me there'd be an audit." "That's the point." She looked past him at Darren, who was now assisting a customer at the booth. "I've already submitted my monthly reports," Beth said. "Everything's up to date." "I'm more interested in what isn't in the reports." Beth crossed her arms. "Like what?" "Like the fact your employee had to leave the booth unattended this morning because he couldn't park. Or that he opens alone, without backup, on a lot that sees over 500 vehicles a day." Beth's voice flattened. "Darren's been trained. He knows how to handle volume." "That's not the point. You've had 3 part-timers resign in the last 2 months. One cited burnout, the other 2 never completed exit interviews. They weren't a good fit, or they weren't supported." Beth exhaled sharply. "I manage this lot efficiently. I don't micromanage. That's why our financials are clean." "Financials aren't the only measure," Troy said. "When employees are forced to work alone, without basic support, that's not efficiency. It's abandonment." Beth's voice rose slightly. "Look, I've been with this company for 6 years. I've run this lot longer than anyone else. I know what works, and I don't appreciate being second-guessed by someone who's never managed a site full-time." Troy didn't flinch. "I work 13-hour shifts alone in a frozen booth. I know what it's like when management hides behind clean spreadsheets." Beth hesitated. "You've got one more chance to explain why you haven't addressed the staffing concerns." Beth's tone shifted from defensive to irritated. "Because I'm not going to blow the budget hiring people who barely show up. I've done this long enough to know who's worth investing in. And frankly, Darren's lucky to have a job. He barely passed his training." Troy's expression hardened. "What exactly does that mean?" "He doesn't present well. He's shy, awkward. Customers complain he's hard to understand." "I've considered replacing him more than once." Troy stepped closer. "You're judging him based on how he talks?" Beth shrugged. "I'm judging him based on how he represents the brand. That's my job." "No," Troy said. "Your job is to lead, not discriminate." Beth blinked. "That's not what I meant, but that's what you said." Troy pulled out his phone and made one call. Harlan answered immediately. "She's done," Troy said. "Blatant bias, neglected staffing, left the booth unstaffed during peak." "Understood," Harlan replied. "I'll notify HR." Beth's face drained as Troy ended the call. "You can wait in your car until security escorts you out," he said calmly. "This lot is under temporary oversight until we assign new leadership." She didn't speak, just turned and walked off without another word. By noon, Darren had been joined by a second staffer from the relief pool. Troy stayed on site to walk the lot, inspect the booth, and review maintenance logs. The booth's ventilation fan hadn't been serviced in over a year, and the backup register battery was corroding. He logged both with the new digital system Harlan had fast-tracked last week. Back at Lot 12 the next day, Troy met with the 2 new staffers now assigned to the location. Neither had worked full-time before, but both had experience in high-traffic lots. One, a woman named Jasmine, had been overlooked in the past because of limited weekend availability. Troy adjusted the schedule to accommodate her other job and kept her on as a weekday lead. The other, Evan, had applied months ago, but was never contacted. "You applied through the agency?" Troy asked him. "Twice. Never heard back." "We'll fix that." Troy created a direct application path for future hires, bypassing the outdated agency process. Within 48 hours, 3 more interviews were scheduled. Slowly, the staffing shortage began to ease, not by rushing in bodies, but by tightening the intake process and making sure people weren't lost in a system built for convenience over connection. Meanwhile, Harlan was working on the long game. He met with the payroll director to restructure shift incentives, small bonuses for consecutive clean audits, emergency coverage rewards, and retention stipends for staff who stayed past 1 year. The goal wasn't just to fill booths, it was to keep good people in them. By the end of the month, incident reports had dropped by more than half. Site visits were up, and for the first time in a year, the company's internal satisfaction survey showed over 70% of employees felt confident in leadership. None of it happened overnight. There were still issues: delayed equipment shipments, a few managers resistant to the new feedback loops, and locations that needed more than just staff. They needed rebuilding, but the foundation had shifted. One evening, just before closing, Troy stepped outside the booth at Lot 12 and looked across the lot. The lights overhead had been replaced, casting a clean, even glow across the pavement. Jasmine was wrapping up her shift, double-checking the register. Evan was restocking the booth with fresh ticket rolls. Troy didn't say much, just nodded once, satisfied. Later, when Harlan called to check in, he asked a single question. "How's it holding together?" Troy answered without hesitation. "It's working, because people finally believe someone's paying attention." Harlan leaned back in his chair, the hum of his office quiet around him. He didn't need a report to confirm it. He'd seen it firsthand, and he knew this wasn't the end of fixing, it was the beginning of leading. From now on, no one would be left freezing in silence, not on his watch.